Next up, we don't have any new syntax. I just want to show you a really important concept, which is that we can nest conditionals inside other conditionals. So I've got two requirements here for our little demo. We're going to ask a user for a password. So enter a password. And we don't know how to connect an HTML form with JavaScript and all of that, so we're going to use prompt. So let's make a variable, const. Once again, it's not going to change, so it's fine to use const. Const, let's do password or user input equals prompt. Please enter a new password. Something like that. All right. And then these are the two requirements. I need the password to be at least 6 characters. So we can do that part pretty simply. And then I want to make sure it does not include a space. So hopefully we know how to do both of these. You may not remember exactly how to do this one. We could check if there's a space inside of the string by using index of. That's one option. That would be probably the simplest. And then to check the length, well, we can just use the length property. So let's begin there. Password must be 6+ characters. So we can do password.length, and we want that to be greater than or equal to 6, right? So let's just do an if. If password.length is greater than or equal to 6, then, well, we can put something here if we want. We can do console.log, long enough password. And then we could have an else right here, console.log, password too short. Must be 6+ characters, right? Okay, so we can begin with that. Let me just make sure everything else is commented out in here. Let's execute this. Please enter a new password. Let's do, I don't know, cat. Password too short. Must be 6+ characters. Let's refresh. Enter a new password. How about just gibberish? Long enough password. Great. Okay, so now let's work on the second part. Password cannot include space. So I could just add this down here as a separate conditional. I could do this. If, well, let me keep the comment there. There we go. If password, and then after that, we could do, just to refresh your memory how this works, we have a string like hello.index of, and then I check to see if an h is in there, right? It's going to give me the index, 0. But if I look for something that's not in there, like a space, it gives me -1. So we want the password to have an index of space of -1. We want that -1. That means there is no space. Okay? So what we can do is do that down here. If password dot index of, and then space equals, triple equals -1. If that's the case, we can console.log. I mean, what should we console.log? You don't have a space. Good job. Good job. No space. Else console.log password cannot contain spaces. All right, so a totally separate conditional. And let's see what happens. So I'm going to hit enter, or refresh the page rather. Enter my password with no space. So I'll make sure it's long enough. How about that? It says long enough password and good job, no space. Now let's try one that is not long enough, like cat. All right, password too short, but we're also getting good job, no space. One more time, I'm going to have a long password with a space in it. Long enough password, password cannot contain spaces. So right now I have two totally separate pieces of logic. But really, if this was a real website, which it's obviously not even close to being, but if it were, we usually just give the user one piece of feedback at a time. Here's one problem, right? We're not going to say good job on this and bad job on this. We're probably just going to say password cannot contain spaces. And then we'll say good job or, valid password or something if both of these are valid. So if the password's long enough and the password does not contain a space. So I can nest this. I could say if password.length is greater than or equal to 6, if that's the case, let's not just print something out. Let's check to see if there is a space or not. So I can copy this and just put it right there. So now this code only runs to even check if there's a space if the password is long enough. If the password's not long enough, we immediately print that out. Too short. If it is long enough, we look for a space. And now instead of saying good job, no space, we'll probably say something like valid password. If we make it to this point right here, it means this was true because that's the only way we get to this code. And then this has to be true to make it to this line right there. The only way that happens is if line 50 and 48 both evaluate to true. If anything goes wrong along the way, we either hit this one or this one, depending on what the issue is. So let's try it now. Let's enter a valid password. How about butterfly? Valid password. And how about one that is long enough but contains spaces, or just one space? Password cannot contain spaces. Okay, so this is working, but it's a little bit clunky having to manage this nesting. Not that nesting is necessarily bad, but really what we care about is if the password's long enough and it does not contain spaces. And there's another way that we could combine this logic, because that's basically what we're doing here. We're combining this logic by nesting it, but there's another way that we'll see coming up very shortly